Noss Mayo is a very picturesque village on the banks of the River Yam, which is situated on the border of Cornwall and Devon. The community is a very close-knit one. It's generally a very happy and a very peaceful place to live. St Peter's was consecrated in 1882. It has since then played a very important part in the life and the community of Noss Mayo. It's always very popular for weddings. It's an extremely picturesque church, and also for all the other events which are church-centred.
St Peter's was built by Edward Charles Baring, who was made the first Lord Revelstoke, literally as a gift to the villagers. The village was without a church, had been without a church for some years, because the original church on the coast a mile and a half away was unfit for use, and so he endowed the village with this church. Basically medieval Gothic perpendicular style. Although late Victorian, largely based in style to some degree to reflect the Church of Holy Cross across the river in Newton Ferrers, which is a much older church, a much older parish. Of its type, it's getting quite a reputation of being a very unspoilt church, considering the style it was built in and the period that it was built in. The carpentry was all done by a well-known woodcarver, Harry Hems, who came to Exeter in the 1870s, and a lot of the stonework in the church is also the work of Harry Hems, the font particularly. He went on to do a number of churches in the southwest, a number of churches in London, and even in the United States. Lord Revelstoke could afford to employ the best. The bells were very good bells. It's a round of eight bells, and there are not a lot of 8-bell churches. Holy Cross in Newton Ferrers is a 6-bell belfry. The bells were originally cast by Warners in London, who are also famous for casting the Big Ben.
They're nearly always rung for weddings. We have a tolling bell for funerals. They're rung on Sundays for services, and so we ring them on high days and holidays and special occasions.
My grandfather and my father were both church wardens here. I was born in 1931. Had to come to church 3 times on a Sunday because father used to come, mother used to come. 4th row, 3rd row back on here. So invariably I started to go up in the tower when I was old enough with father and watch the bell ringers. But I didn't actually become a bell ringer until after the war. We were getting shorter ringers because a lot of the older ones had popped off during the war. And I learnt to ring in 1945. I've been ringing ever since. Each village had its own little nucleus of bell ringers, and they used to get together and have a few jugs and competition on a Saturday. Newton bells, Newton got 6. Bit of competition between the ringers always. But Christmas Day, Easter Day, who's going to strike first? 6 o'clock in the morning, Newton or Noss? Just depended how many they'd had the night before, I think, on many occasions. The bell ringers outing, an annual outing, was really to get funds to pay for repairs to the bells which needed doing. So invariably you'd have about perhaps 20, 15 perhaps bell ringers, but the rest of the coach was made up of, at least said about some of those outings, the better, I think.
We're a very exposed tower. If I tell you that a flag is put up there and on a bad month, it can virtually be destroyed. Bells went up in 1898. No, they went up before that actually. They went up in 1880 something. I've looked back on the file, and the file was opened 20 years ago, recognising our problems with the bells. So we've finally, through some generous donations through the parish, we've been able to raise the funds to really undertake it now. We take the key with us because the vicar's in the church and she might not lock us up there. Here we go then. Here is the ringing room, and we've got 8 bells. This is the Elecum system, you can put tension into these ropes and you can play these bells. One person can play all the bells. Right. Voila. That's an emergency when you haven't got 8 bell ringers turning up, or you haven't got any bell ringers turning up. This is being replaced. We shall leave this in situ because it's part of the fabric of the church as it was built, but we will be putting a modern electronic system in. So above here is the clock room, and then above the clock room is the belfry with the bells in. Here is the clock mechanism. It's been dropped a few times by looking. It's been hugely reliable. It's been maintained for many years by John Hockaday, who was the captain of the tower, man and boy in this tower, and he looked after this clock. From the clock mechanism itself, we have the 4 drive shafts that run out to each face. So we have 4 faces on the tower, and these run out to each one. We will have to move this aside to open up the trapdoors so that we can drop the bells down through. We're taking the opportunity here to send the clock mechanism back to the clockmakers, and they're going to strip it and clean it and give it a really good service and overhaul. We're taking advantage to have an automatic winding system put on so that someone doesn't have to climb up every week and wind the clock. So it's cracking, it's very reliable. Next stop is the belfry. Now this is quite difficult to get up when you've got long legs like us because they sort of go up sideways. Okay, so here we are up in the belfry. This is the tenor bell, which is the biggest bell in the set, and it weighs about 17 or 1800 weight. That's the biggest. These are called the headstocks. The headstocks, in this case, they are the original old oak headstocks from the 1880s. You can see terrible corrosion from where the southwesterly weather comes in here. The bell on that side as well is affected in the same way, and the bell that I referred to, which has had a bearing collapse, number 3 bell, which was that one that actually went out of action for a while. Certainly the bells have never been down since they first came up here in the 1880s, so they've done well. They'll all be removed, and they will have cast alloy headstocks put on. Perhaps other village churches aren't operating on a sort of 1 in 5 hill, which is what we are here. So there's going to be a bit of sweat pushing these bells up the slope to get them on the lorry. In order to get the bells out of the tower, it's necessary first of all to strip everything off the bells. So we had a father and son team up from Cornwall who were specialists at this, and they set to and they stripped everything off, ready for the bell hangers to come down. Huge timbers were put up so that they could put the winches on to lift.
Tailors came from Loughborough, took the bells down, which was an extraordinary experience. Our biggest bell, which is 1600 weight, watching that come down through the trapdoors and into the kitchen was quite a spectacle. A feat of engineering, of which I've never seen like.
It's a low-tech but gutty business. There's no great sciences in it, and whilst it's a bit of a mystery for anybody who isn't a bell ringer, but actually through this process it became remarkably clear. I will, however, be particularly relieved and delighted when the whole thing is completed.
So many people said, "Oh, I miss the bells." And several people said, "I miss the sound of the bells waking me up, and therefore I'm not waking up in the mornings."
Probably the only place that you can take a bell today is actually Loughborough. We had a small party of about, I think, 12 or 14 of us went up to the foundry. Everybody, to a man, was just amazed how they appeared to be stepping back into Victorian England.
It's the only bell foundry in the country. 5 hours driving time and travelling time for 3 hours at the factory was well worth it. I was in a permanent state of excitement because it's a thrill, something I won't see again, sort of once in a lifetime experience.
If anybody ever gets the opportunity to go to a bell foundry, you should go. It was like Dante's Inferno, but it was absolutely fascinating and very, very Dickensian.
So we saw our bells going through the process. Now we've got a fine set of bells. Lord Revelstoke gave us a fine set of bells. They clean them up beautifully. They then go into the tuning department, and there is where they're put on a machine, and to get them in tune they take the metal out. So you end up with these bells lovely and clean and graphite coated on the outside, because we had them graphite coated. So immaculate on the outside, and inside, where they'd been scraped out to get the tune, bright metal interiors, wonderful.
It was only a matter of relatively few weeks later that they were delivered back here. A bell hanger came from Cornwall, and we had to have a team of burly builders to help get them in.
But you need a few hands to get the bells man-handled. The biggest bell that's a big lump of metal to move about.
The access to St Peter's is not that easy. And seeing these bells come down on a flatbed trolley with 8 men at the back holding onto them with big ropes, just hoping it doesn't snap and they fly down the slope and into the water.
These days, thank goodness, there are electric winches rather than manual ones, because we did have to do some of it by manual, and you do lots of this and you find the bell's gone up an inch, and you do a whole lot more and the bell's gone up another inch. Luckily, with an electric winch, press the button and just wait for the process.
When the bells were rehung, it was a really emotional occasion. Certainly when our great big 1600 weight one went up, it was fantastic. It went up very, very slowly, shining beautifully in the light, and then it disappeared up through the trapdoors as if it was going up to heaven. It wasn't a dry eye in the church. It was amazing. And then, of course, they rang the first peal, and we had people queuing up, literally, to want to ring the bells. So it was a very joyous, I think was the word, and happy event.
To my ears, yeah, they are brighter. The sound is a brighter sound, and I think all the bell ringers agree.
Over there, I hear them better than you can here. It's providing the wind's in the right direction, and they sound lovely. They do sound lovely.
And so we now have bells which bell ringers from all over Devon and Cornwall, and even further afield, would like to come and ring, because they are exceptionally good and they do sound beautiful.
I've been interested to discover that bell ringing is truly a disease. Even the bell hangers, they wouldn't go home at night and just relax. One of them knew of a particularly fine set of tailor's bells in Plymouth, and he knew the night when the bell ringers would be there ringing, and he was in there ringing with them.
We involved with the church now are basically caretakers. We've taken over someone who did the job before, and hopefully someone around who will want to continue. That we're just sort of part of the process, keeping the village alive and keeping the tradition.
St Peter's is arguably the finest example of Victorian Gothic in the country, and it becomes more and more important to maintain the church in the order that it was built. I think that's our duty.
You do feel that you are a custodian, and it is a very enjoyable occupation. I would encourage anybody to take part in the maintenance and care of their church building if they have one, because a church is an architectural monument, and I think churches, I hope, will always be part of community life, and certainly St Peter's will always play a very important part in the life of our village community.